Today is Tuesday, January 30th, and you're listening to the Beer Temple Podcast.
Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again.
Hello, and welcome to the Beer Temple Podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike Shalau, and I'm here with, you probably wouldn't have guessed it, but your producer and co-host for the day, Sick Fades,
nice.
Chris Quinn of the Beer Temple.
Yeah,
Chris.
I've been studying under the master, the Fade Master Surge.
Yeah,
so
through Fade Osmosis, learning how to run the board.
Yeah, so thank you.
I have to say, your best fade I've ever heard.
Yeah, I mean, it was good. It was nice, steady hand, slow fade. So I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm excited, and we'll see. There's still a lot to screw up, and I'm sure.
Of course, always is.
Yeah,
I'm sure we'll do probably all of them.
Yeah. How are you doing?
Good, man. I'm doing all right. Not much happened in the last week that I want to talk about.
All right, perfect. Moving on.
All good news all the time.
Yeah. I will say right off the bat, as a way of just like getting it out there right now, I think I referred to how I feel to you earlier as if a truck hit me in the face or a truck ran over my face or something like that. So it was our company outing last night, and I don't make a habit of feeling like this on a Tuesday early afternoon, but
sure, that's what we tell the people at least.
Yeah, not in my finest form
Got
right
a
now.
Jordan brown bottle flu game coming for you.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Not like we have a big show, cool show at all.
No,
for you to.
No, I know.
Come in very hungover.
Get well rested for and stuff like that. But yeah, we were out, and I felt like it was one of those, the captain has to go down with the ship. So I felt I owed it to myself to
yourself
to be the last person out.
You are the captain and the ship in this metaphor, not the...
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway.
Should we thank the listeners?
Yes, we should. So thanks to everyone who has downloaded the show or who's listening live. No, not listening live, but listening via the airwaves.
Right.
105.5 FM, WLPN, Lumpen Radio. Thanks to all the folks over there at Lumpen, Edmar and Jamie and everybody else. Thanks to the listeners who've been sending in lots of mail lately. So we'll have to get to that. And
it's gonna be hard to top the ransom note aesthetic of the last one we got.
We've had some,
but
yeah,
if anyone can do it,
it's on the Mount Rushmore.
Our
for
listeners
sure.
can. Yeah,
that's true. The parchment paper was pretty good
too.
So one quick bit of news. We just have to remind people in a month, less than a month now. It's like 3 weeks. We're doing our third installment of the book club, Hops and Glory. We're going to have Pete Brown. So, and we do have copies for sale at the shop now. Mm-hmm. So go and read up on that. And I'm excited. But I'm more excited for this show, I should say. Don't tell Pete Brown I said that. But
Pete Brown's cool and all, but
yeah. So we have 3 guests. Is this our first all virtual show? I think it might be.
Since the pandemic, probably.
Oh, true. Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Unpleasantness.
The new world. Yeah. So we have 3 virtual guests, but we're still going to do introducing in order of seniority, but we're doing a kind of a focused episode, right? It's going to be on beer, art, and design. Mm-hmm. I'm super excited to introduce our guests, so we should probably just get right to it.
And we should tell them order of seniority on this show means how many times you've been on our show.
Yeah, I don't know what other order of seniority there is. Yeah. Certainly none other that matter to me. So yes, order of seniority is how many times you've been on the show, and that would make you, Mr. Magliaro, the senior member. So, how are you, Gabriel?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. And I think definitely the first time I've been introduced as the senior member on this podcast.
Well, savor it. Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for coming on. How are things with you?
Good. Yeah, it's been a good start to the year. And Mike and I were just talking about the gloom that set in over Chicago for the past couple of weeks. And, January is never the liveliest time, but winds up being busy around here, just like trying to set up the year and making sure we don't ruin it all. And so off to a screaming start.
Yes, haven't ruined it all yet. Good. One month down. You're 1/12 of the way there. Yeah.
I may have.
Yeah, well, maybe you have. Well, thanks for coming on. Next to, I think it's a tie for the non-senior member. We won't call them junior members. We'll call them non-senior members.
Break the tie by how many custom neons they've made for you.
Oh, that's also a tie.
It's a tie.
How about distance? We'll start from closest to furthest. So we have Michael Freimuth. So the also what we do for first-time guests, if you could just introduce yourself and who you are as it relates to the beer world. Michael.
Yeah. No, thank you guys. Thanks for having me. Nice to be here for the first time. Let's see. I work really closely with Marz Brewing out of Chicago. And for context, I run a design studio in New York City. I grew up in Chicago, so I spent the first part of my career there, so I became really close with the founder, Ed Mar, and I've just had a beautiful 20-plus year relationship with that man. Back in the day, it was not beer. It was like art magazines and music shows and posters and whatnot. But over the years, it's kind of grown to that. So I'm not sure if I'm sort of a floating creative director for Marz, but it feels like it. And I love the collaborative work that I do. And at the same time, I run a 15-person design studio. We're in Brooklyn and been around for about 12 years. So get to touch a lot of things, but beer world is a very big part of my focus.
Awesome. Yeah, listeners of the show are no stranger to Edmar. He's definitely the senior guest on the show. He might even be still above you, Mike.
Yeah,
you're a
co-host,
and I think Ed might have been on more than you. So
when you live above the studio, it makes it a little easier.
Yes, it's true. But thank you so much for coming on. And coming all the way from Sweden, the third member of the panel today, Mr. Karl Grandin. What's up, man? How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. So awesome to be here with you. I mean, it's night here. I guess it's in the middle of the day for you guys.
Yeah.
And all the snow outside has turned into slush, as it usually does. We'll go back to snow sooner or later.
Yeah. Could you tell everyone who you are?
So I'm Karl Grandin. My relation to the beer scene is that I do the art and design for a Swedish brewery called Omnipollo. And we brew all over the place. But I do all the art from this place, from my studio, upstairs in a old church in Sundbyberg, which is a suburb outside of Stockholm.
Very cool. Seems fitting. A cool place to do cool design.
Yeah. Old church.
In an old church. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, Karl, for coming on. Since you helped put together the outline, Mike, and since
we worked on it together,
presumably you don't feel like a bus ran over your face.
You don't know that?
True. I said presumably.
Yeah, I don't.
Why don't you start the conversation and see what these three guys have to say, if they have anything to say. I'm sure we'll have the most interesting takes.
We'll talk over you quite a bit about how to do art.
Yeah, and what you really meant to say.
Right. I think what I'm hearing is, well, obviously you guys have three of the most unique and amazing brands in craft beer across the world, and so to start off very universally, like, do you think there are universal principles for good beer label art and brewery branding design? And if so, could you like talk about them a little bit? And are they different than designs for principles for good design generally? Are there specific things for beer that you think work that are more specific to beer or might not work in design generally? But yeah, are there principles of good beer branding that you tend to follow? Circular question.
Yeah,
anyone can jump in.
I'll call someone out if not. It'll go in order of seniority, FYI. So just start saying something, Gabriel.
All right, I'll jump in then. I guess my response to that would be that, craft beer did a great job exploding that idea that there had to be some set template that beer used to communicate a set of ideas or principles or information that you needed in order to either care about a brand or make a decision when buying beer. And that all melted away. And I think what's been nice is that beer design has morphed into a choose your own adventure that helps to communicate a personality or a way of thinking. And there isn't one way to do that any longer. And I would say all of us have to question the life of a beer. Is it going to be sold in our own premise and just inside our walls? And what does it need to succeed in that way? Or is it going to go out and find itself across different states or countries and be this lone wolf out there that needs to do all these different jobs in order to effectively communicate about your brewery and what's inside of it? So I think there's a lot of different goals we have when setting out to make a beer brand work, is what I would say.
Can I add to that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I totally agree with you. And I think, my approach to working with Omnipollo was actually the exact opposite of, trying to find a formula. It was looking at what was out there and just trying to do something that, wasn't out there. Me and Henok, so Henok's the head brewer of Omnipollo. And when he introduced me to, I don't know, the sort of the deeper levels of the craft beer community or craft beer world, also outside of Europe, like what all the stuff that I saw was, I don't know, there was a lot of formulas going on. A lot of the things just looked the same, very conventional in a sense, and it's maybe especially here in Europe. It was very sort of fanzine, steampunk kind of folk punk style graphics, or super conventional, like gothic lettering, gold, blah blah blah, and that's nice. I don't dislike that, but it was just I didn't want to be, I didn't join Henok in Omnipollo to play covers. I wanted to make my own songs, right?
Okay.
So we were fans of the culture, basically, and I definitely am a fan of craft beer culture. But we just wanted to make something that was more fun and more, far out, something that we were missing, basically.
Yeah, this is so well said, guys. I'm so glad I got to go last of the three of us because I wanted to know the answer, actually. But it's funny, I keep filtering it through our different, brands as I know them, as they exist. And Marz has always been such an experiment, just like an ongoing kind of iterative experiment. So the answer to this, had you asked me 10 years ago or 8 years ago, would have been different. It's different, not week to week, but I think that's what I love about it, is that there isn't a set, the constraints are the ones that we build for ourselves. And they're also pretty specific to, I think, what the company and brand is trying to do. So over the years, there was a time when Marz labels had, you you couldn't read the name because it was so small. The Mars logo itself was miniaturized. The irony is the first ones we launched had a huge M on them.
Right.
And for reasons I almost can't remember, we discontinued that. And now we're slowly curving back to the fact that there are so many over the years that we've created, and perhaps there's been a little bit of a, there was a big bang. We're experiencing a little bit of a crunch in terms of how many beers are actually out there. But we've now begun to establish some standards that I think help us because of what we're trying to do, which is build a little more consistency and brand awareness. I think Half Acre also does like an excellent job of towing the line between it's clearly within your brand world, but there's such wonderful diversity across all the label designs. And I mean, you could go down the line and say probably what the merits are of each of our brewing, design ethos. But I just love that this answer is different for each brand, each brewery.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think those were really cool answers, and it is interesting how all three can be approached in different ways and still be impactful, and I think really kind of special. And I'm curious, and I may be going off script already, but Karl, I don't know if this is the case, but I feel like Omnipollo is I don't know if it predates Half Acre or not, but you've certainly been, I think, doing elevated world-class beer labels for quite a while. And I was just curious, when you were first starting out, and we can, kind of expand this to everybody else, but when you were first starting up, I remember first noticing Omnipollo on the shelf, and I think it was the keyhole design, and I'm sorry, I don't know the names. I don't remember the names of the beers, and the candle, and they were screen printed on glass, and it was like, whoa, what is this? And then buying them because of that and bringing them to share, and everyone being like, I need to try what's in that, because what is it? It was like, it was mysterious. And I was just curious. I mean, talk about a miniature label. I mean, there was nothing on the front. It was only on the back is what it said it was. Was that, it sounds crazy, to do that, especially with the first offerings of someone not knowing what the brewery is, to literally not have anything but no words, no nothing, just the design. I would just love to hear a little bit of the backstory around some of these early labels when you were starting out, and these kind of this daring approach to beer label design.
Sure. Yeah. So the backstory to that actually is that I was working with a denim brand, a fashion label called Cheap Monday, which was pretty popular in Europe at that time, and that was probably between 2004 to 2008, something like that. And it went from being super like tiny punk rock, do-it-yourself type label to something really big. And we ended up selling the company to H&M in the end, which is kind of a crazy thing, at least here in Europe. So we went from doing this, working in a basement, screen printing our own T-shirts, doing whatever we wanted to. And then in 4 or 5 years, it just became this huge thing, right? And we somehow, I think we managed up until the very end to actually have the same, we were going that direction the whole time. We knew what we were doing, and we just tried to not listen to anyone else telling us, what to do. And, I feel like I got out of that thing at the very right time. I was really sick of it. I was working way too much. So maybe, I stopped working with Cheap Monday, and half a year later, I met Henok Fenty, and he was a home brewer at the time. and he was making the beer of his dreams. That's what our mutual friend said. So Natalie, our mutual friend, also said that it didn't look very nice, the stuff that he's like been working on. She'd seen some of the sketches, like some drafts for labels and stuff. So she said, like, maybe you should do something, you know, because you're like a graphic designer, artist, whatever. And, you know, I always felt that I was like a little bit too weird for conventional graphic design, but didn't really fit into the white cube sort of art, you know, conventional art environment in a sense. So sure, why not? Like I'll try it. And when Henok and I met, and he explained this idea about making this beer, which was actually happened to be the beer with the keyhole on it. It's called Leon.
Yeah.
It was the first beer we made. So I mean, I didn't know the guy. I mean, we just met through this project. So you know, I just told him what I wanted to do. Like I wanted to silk screen print bottles, you know, no matter the cost, blah, 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 blah. I just told him all these things that I wanted, like no words on the bottle, blah, blah, blah. And he said yes, you know, because, you know, in my experience, you know, if you demand a lot and you get some, but I just got everything, which was awesome. And I remember our distributors were freaking out because they didn't have, you know, like you just said, you want that bottle with a keyhole. You want a bottle with a candle on it. That's what I was thinking.
Right.
Our distributors were like, we need a name, you know, how are people going to be able to order this in a bar and stuff? And to me, I just wanted to do something that I wanted to look at. Like I wanted to order a beer, you know, because there was a candle on it. I wanted to order a beer because there was a keyhole on it.
Yeah, it's funny. It's interesting too that I don't know the name of the beer, or didn't remember the name of the beer. Yet I bought a print of it, and it's been sitting up ever since Beer Temple opened. I opened with a print of that on the wall. It's been sitting there looking at me for 11 years, and so I know the beer and the label very well, but I don't even know the keyhole. Yeah, Leon. Yeah,
that's Leon. It's named after Henok's first son.
Okay. Yeah.
And the candle is actually, it's called Mazarin. It's named after my son.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
Okay, yeah. But it is interesting that I know the beers, but the names of the beer are kind of secondary to the actual label and design, and that's how I know the beer. It's like, oh, the candle beer, the keyhole beer, you know.
Which you'd probably remember better than the name. If it just had the name and block print on the front, you'd be like, okay, fine.
Yeah, absolutely. There's several. There's several of them. Fata Morgana. I mean, I think at least two people with that label tattooed on their body.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How many do you have?
Well, they were both me.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't have them. But yeah, very interesting.
I think the way I sold it to Henok was basically that it's better to just like do, you know, something that you really want to do. And then if you fail, yeah, whatever, you know, at least you made a great beer and it looked awesome. But if you succeed, it would be fucking amazing because, you know, you can keep running in that, you know, running that trail. You know, you set a path, right? Set a direction. But if you make something that you don't want to make, you know, you make something bland, you know, conventional, and that becomes successful, it's going to be a curse because then you're stuck on that trail instead. That's terrible.
In a meta sense, that was kind of expressive of what he was doing with the beers, where he was trying to make things that were like, I don't know if aesthetic is the right word, but something that was beautiful, interesting, unique, and above all, something only Omnipollo would make. And so having a brand that, even if it doesn't say those words on it, expresses that and conveys that is impressive, and works perfectly in ways that you wouldn't, you know, typical capital B branding wouldn't tell you to do. Mm-hmm. And I guess that I want to ask you guys, like, how often and how much does the specific beer that is being made and the style of the beer and the impetus for the brewer's reasons for making it, how does that play into how you design the beer, the label?
Yeah, if at all.
If at all. Yeah.
That's a good question. Before I answer, I just want to say I love what you said, Karl, partly because I think the earlier question about, what's a universal principle. I think our ability to occasionally, if not always, make an artifact, like that the artwork we've built is something people want to hold on to and keep. I mean, that is not a terrible universal principle. If like you buy it, you tattoo it, you want to hold on to that, especially, I mean, I have a few of those, right? Over the years, I've collected things where there's a beautiful bottle, an incredible, beer bottle, for instance. I think, just to circle back to that for a moment, like, what a wonderful lens to put on this stuff. Like, it's so unique that you can't throw it away. You wouldn't want to. It feels like, as important as the drink itself, if not more so. So I thought it's something I always see with Omnipollo, and it makes me jealous, frankly. But sorry, so to answer your question, we try to keep a pretty loose approach to the inspiration. I mean, in a way, it's funny because I get to work on these other, direct to consumer, occasionally retail, consumer packaged good brands, like you name it, over the course of the last 10 years. It's interesting how often it comes up, like, should the design reflect, or should you be able to project the taste of this thing, or is it simply aesthetic inspiration? And I think it is a pretty subjective, take on it. And it again brings it back to what Gabriel was saying about, where does this thing get delivered? Like, do you actually need to communicate what it tastes like, or should it just be something freaky and weird, and therefore you grab it and you read that it's a dark lager? I think we typically subscribe a little bit to the version where, like, let's find a really interesting jumping off point and blow it up, preferably kind of at a conceptual level. And if it happens to look a little bit like it might taste, whether that's through a light color association or something iconographical, like whatever it is, then that's great. But tends to be a little secondary. With that said, plenty of lines that end up having kind of multiples of themselves, like, do inevitably lean back towards having some, I suppose, like, taste lens on them, so that, yeah, it does sort of look like what it tastes like. But we're not held back by that. I'm not trying to say we have best of both worlds, but it's a little bit, try to find a blend.
How about you, Gabriel?
I really lean into style a lot when thinking about what a beer should be named, and ultimately what that visual is, and name and visual. These things have a lot to do with each other, but I feel like beer styles ultimately have personality and sort of encourage a way of being and how people are going to enjoy these beers. And, like a little 4% pale ale as opposed to a, 14% barrel aged imperial stout. I try to, like, embody those things, or put them as drivers in my mind when setting out on naming, which naming is an absolute torture course in 2024. So we tend to go with name first, and then follow that with imagery. But I very much feel like, and this is how I drink beer, I sort of come at it with a way of being as to what I'm going to choose, and how I'm feeling. So yeah, style is a big deal for me, and hopefully capturing the aesthetic of that beer.
I want to talk in a moment a little bit about the impetus and how the label and the art kind of comes to be, and how it's associated with the beer. But I'm just also curious, personally, with Half Acre, Gabriel, relatively early on and pretty, like, unique to the breweries that I was aware of, you hired a full-time artist for Half Acre. When, as I just said, maybe you weren't the only one, but you certainly, in the Chicagoland area, it was the only brewery that I knew of that was doing it, and you certainly weren't the biggest brewery and just had, all this excess cash. Why did you feel it was important to bring on an artist full-time in-house so early on in the life of Half Acre?
Yeah, that was definitely a unique thing at that point in time. And I think it really was just a follow through on what Half Acre was and really continues to be, which is a creative project. And we were doing so many different beers. And at that point in time, we were, I'll say adventurous. Each beer was a new opportunity to say, what can this be and what should it look and how can it be different from the last? And like, we weren't even using the same logo ever. It was all over the place. And that adventure hopefully found a through line that communicated what Half Acre was. And Phineas Xavier Jones is the person you're talking about. And he is, wildly talented and really could jump into a bunch of different styles and ways of being at that time. So it was a great opportunity to be exploratory and do different things. So yeah, that adventure was it that we derived a lot of enjoyment and I think value from that. And that was a great part of sort of realizing what we were. We've tried to narrow down, like Michael was describing, we tried to put some walls up around ourselves at this point and maybe be a bit more effective in communicating or distilling down what Half Acre is. But at that point, we were just like turning over new pages all the time and seeing what was exciting for Half Acre as a brand.
From my perspective as someone who started off drinking your beers before I ever worked at a brewery and then now owns their own brewery, the commitment that you had to developing and articulating and iterating upon a style and aesthetic and having great artwork with it changed the trajectory of Chicago craft beer as a whole. Like, everyone looked to that and was like, well, we can't just like put our little text-based labels on this and have people believe it's the same level of quality as what Half Acre is doing.
Right. The same level of care was put into the beer. If that much care was put into creating the wrapper for that.
Yeah, and I think it went so far in every brewery looking up to that because you were so early in doing that, and then the ability for more and more breweries to connect to people because of the focus they were putting more closely on the aesthetic because of the example you set really built Chicago craft beer in a way that it wouldn't have if you hadn't done that. So,
well, that's very, very kind words. I appreciate that. But I'll say, like, in those days, Floyd's was a big touch point for us because I think they, there were some molds, right? Classic beer, legacy brands. There was some an obvious mold there, visual hierarchy, all these sort of things. And then you got into craft, and you had Sierra and brands like Bigfoot that started to put this soft, more illustrative feel into it, and craft beer became this like babbling brook coursing through a mountain setting, and then Floyd sort of came in the late 90s, early 2000s, and started really, I think, turning things on its head and incorporating really bright colors. I think probably you can give them credit for character-based branding in beer, where you're attaching an idea of someone or something to a brand. That was new, and I think it helped to shed light and give people additional touch points in order to dive into these brands. So, pinks and purples, and also juxtaposing those colors with what was really like a lot of times this sinister branding was, this was pretty wild, and especially for the time and for the sheer quantity of people that were paying attention then, it was really adventurous. So thanks for the credit on the Chicago beer stuff, but we were, very much led and inspired by others in getting to the point where we were.
Wonderful deflection. I'm just kidding. That actually, Floyd's brings up one that's a personal question that I had for you guys because of how impactful they were. When I talked to our artist Joe Kraft, we have 3 rules which is no skulls, no IP theft, no direct IP theft, and no puns. That the last 2 aren't necessarily Floyd's, but they were so strong with that imagery, and so many breweries did so many skulls. Do you guys have like specific articulated we won't do this for your brand, or things that define what you do kind of in a negative space? Like, we don't do all these things over here, so anything else can be on board? Or is it just label to label, you kind of know it when you see it, if it's a Half Acre or Mars or Omnipollo label? Whoever. Karl, you're on mute.
Oh, you're on mute. There you go.
There we go. Yeah, sorry. It's funny because the first thing that comes to my mind when you say that is that of course not, you know.
Sure.
Like, I want to do all those cliches. I just want to like show them from another angle. You know? Like so the company I was working with before Omnipollo, Cheap Monday, the clothing brand, the logo was a skull, and the reason for that was because we were so sick of skulls. It was like, how can you sort of invert this or like mutate it into something that's, you know, actually interesting? It's the hardest thing, you know. Like, skulls were everywhere, like in the early 2000s. It was so I'm so sick of it. But I mean, that being said, I think, you know, skeletons and zombies with like hop cone heads and stuff like that is just not my thing, you know. But I think the reason is it's not because I don't like it necessarily. It's just because I've seen so much of it, and you know, it's like other people have been doing that, you know, in a great way, or making beer that looks like what's inside it. Like, I'm not really interested in making a packaging that is an illustration of what's inside it. I wanted to go together, you know. I wanted to expand. I want the imagery and the name, hopefully, to like expand, you know, the beverage itself. But that's my goal with it. I was thinking about what you said earlier about names, and yes, naming beers is getting increasingly harder, especially since I mean, it was easier before because everyone was doing puns, right? And we just didn't, so it was easy, you know, just stay off puns, and you know, anything works. But now it's super tricky. But I remember seeing, I mean, this was probably like in the 90s or something, but this is this amazing Swiss artist duo called Fischli and Weiss. They made all sorts of different types of art, but one of their best pieces is this tiny, like unfired clay sculpture, like maybe this size. And it's just like two persons in a bed, very random, not very nice looking or anything. And the name of the sculpture is Mr. and Mrs. Einstein, shortly after the conception of their genius son, Albert. And it's just so good. I mean, because the artwork itself kind of sucks, but it becomes a masterpiece with that name, right? So I think, you know, fortunately, I'm a fan of Hanock's beers. Like, I love it. It's my favorite beers. So, you know, I always assume that it would be something amazing, right? So you have a good beer, and then I can do anything, and then you come up with a name that just makes it work somehow, you know, hopefully. But I agree, it's increasingly hard. Everything's been used.
Yeah. That's why we have the no puns, because any puns that are left are probably pretty bad puns. Puns can be fun. But I've also broken all those rules, by the way.
Yeah.
Right, because once you decide on something, I don't know, at least to me, it's like I have this like itchy feeling that I want to break those rules. Like,
Yeah.
you know, when we were first opening up our first tap room here in Stockholm, people were asking me like, so what are you going to do? Like, how is it going to be very, you know, how are you going to make it different from all the other craft beer bars that's around? How are you going to make it? You're not going to use neon lights, right? You're not going to use this and that and that. You're not going to have tap handles, blah, blah, blah. Of course, I want to have neon lights on tap handles. I just don't do it like in a weird, mutated way, right?
Right. You take the kind of the language that's existed in beer bars forever, and then you kind of make your own poems with it inside. You rearrange them in ways that's more artistic or more visually appealing than just a St. Pauli girl neon in the corner.
That's a beautiful way of putting it.
Or just, I think there's a self-awareness to it as well. It's like besides the fact that hopefully, you know, other people's IP is off the table, to hit one of your rules, but yeah, do the cliches. Just what's the twist? Like, there should maybe that is some kind of a rule. It's like we would love to have that second aha moment, whether it's with the name, the artwork. Do something that is deeply cliche, but twist it so that there's something novel. I think that's if it doesn't do that, then you're probably kind of in the danger zone.
For sure.
And I think, as it relates to skulls, what I think is wonderful about branding, and take Floyd's, because they brought the skull to beer for the most part, but you meet them, and there is a direct connection to this imagery and to who they are as human beings.
Totally.
And there's an authenticity about that, and their branding, it really is a direct reflection of who they are. And I feel like that is part of it. Karl, we haven't spent a lot of time together, but see you guys at fests over the years, and it's like there's a connection between the Omnipollo brand and what I see when I see you as human beings. And Michael, like the stuff that you guys work on, man, that is Ed. That is that is very much that feels like Ed, and I love that about brands when I can experience them visually and then I meet the humans and it's like, okay, this is who you are. And I think that empowers the connection to all of it and makes it real. I've had the inverse happen where I see a brand and it is this, and then I meet the individuals that are behind it and it's like, like you guys chose this as the thing that was going to make your sales what they needed to be, or something, right? This was like a selection out of the Rolodex. And I think it's always wonderful if that through line can be about the brand and those people, and it all stacks up as being one message.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like, not to go back to Iswas, but the No Skulls was like more of a joke, and it is more pointing to that thing of authenticity, right? Where like you see a lot of breweries start off one way and then they start making styles that you didn't think they would make, and then they start having branding that you're like, that doesn't look like what you started with or who you guys really are. And so for me, that was more just like, do something more authentic. And it was shocking how many people, before we settled on Joe, we went with at least 4 or 5 people to do labels, and 3 of them were like, oh, thank God you didn't ask me to draw skulls, which is just like that's how that joke kind of developed, because they assumed every brewery was going to be asking them to draw a skull for their double IPA. And so it was more just this joke of like, how do we keep thinking about what the authentic expression of the beers that we make and who we are, or I guess I am.
Do you think of that with your labels? Do you think kind of what Gabriel was saying, that they are a reflection of you? Is that something that you've ever thought of in the past, or is it?
Yeah, totally.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah?
I wouldn't have kept working with Joe if they weren't somewhat of an expression of myself, but they're also an expression of him. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't really know much about beer. I usually explain to him kind of like what why
this
we're
is a
making the
good beer,
beer.
I promise.
Yeah,
even though you don't
this
like
one's
it.
good. No, just because no one bought it doesn't mean it's not a good beer, Joe.
Yeah.
And they're really expressions of him too. And I try to give him almost no notes, because I told him what it was in the first place, and then however it filters through him is a more interesting thing than me being like, it should have been a dinosaur or whatever, some stupid aesthetic that I had in my head before he started drawing it. Mm-hmm. Every once in a while he does something that you're not allowed to put on a beer label, and then I have to be like, Joey can't put that on there. But I like it being an expression of the both of us. It's
interesting, yeah, the way we're talking about this collectively, but also I'm so curious how you guys perceive Marz, because I'm in it. So, inherently it can be a little opaque because I'm in the middle of it. And the way that I perceive, your guys' collective brands or individual brands, like, I think you're right that it is a reflection of Ed. But what's interesting about that is that Ed's kind of made up of he has this incredible collective of humans and artists, and just name a person who's done a thing and he knows that person, or he knows a person who's done it. It's incredible his community that goes so far beyond like beer world. So, you know, I think maybe that's the collective that looks like Ed. Gabriel, I'm curious if that's what your take is, because like you look at one label and we've intentionally never had a house style. You know, we've worked with hundreds of artists over the years. In some ways that makes the job actually, in my mind, sometimes really hard. There's also a little bit of a, you know, we can be somewhat hands off depending on who the artist is. Like I'm not art directing the hell out of an artist who I enjoy working with. I might give some points of inspiration, but you know, that can really range, and it depends on who the person is, you know, they're frankly like their engagement level, their experience doing something like a label with us. But I'm not really sure what my point here is, except that I always see Marz as a collective, aesthetically and like functionally. And it comes with constraints. It also comes with some wonderful benefits. But, you know, we've never had a single house artist. We've never had, like, perhaps it is that eclecticism that is what the brand is in some ways. But I guess I'm curious, like, what do you
For
guys
me,
see
yes. Yeah.
when you look at that?
Yeah, I see Ed as this like just like exactly a collection of inspirations across like everything. And I just think you can't, it's not an accident. Like it all syncs, you know, the artists that you're talking about, that you're working with, like you chose them because of a broader thing that allows them to fit inside of this world. It wasn't like you chose them for a reason. Ed chose them, whomever. And that somehow fits inside of this web, and it all syncs up. And you see Ed, like I know Ed well, so like I guess I'm an insider observing all this, but it adds up. And I would say the same, you know, for Omnipollo work and anybody that I really respect on this level. It's like, yeah, that all adds up. That syncs, and that's I don't think you can't fake that. You can't, you know, it's either there or it's not.
Yeah.
I think you guys do the eclecticism thing or eclectic thing better than almost anyone else. A lot of people do that with a much less curated eye. There's a lot of just like, we work with a bunch of artists to see what sticks. And then yours all seem to pull together in a way that is more cohesive than a lot of the other craft breweries that kind of try that. Or do that and do it relatively successfully. Yeah. Like they create a brand because of that, but yours is the most, in my opinion, the most like kind of cohesive, the most, because it is inspired by like who Ed is and the like curation. Like if he's anything, he's a curator of things,
of taste. Yeah, yeah.
And that really suits that brand really well.
Michael, earlier on, you said something to the effect about some of Karl's design that you were, I don't know if you said jealous or something, but you know, in kind of a positive way, you were such a fan of it. I remember being in Denmark with Edmar, and we went into a bottle shop, and he was having some of that same vibe I was getting from him. He was picking up Omnipollo bottles, and he was picking up Mikkeller bottles and looking at them and just being like, fuck, they're so good. They're so good. And just like loving them and being like, I don't know if jealous is the right word, but just really just looking at it and being inspired and really just loving how great it was and how much he enjoyed it. And I'm the same way. If I see someone who's doing something like really good in the beer world or whatever it is, I'm just like, you motherfucker, you're so good. Is there anyone out there, let's just say in the beer world, but it can go outside of that you just are really a fan of and just really, really like what they're doing with their design? Gabriel, we know it's Three Floyds for you, but if there's anyone else other than that, maybe I would just like to know, like who are you guys fans of and just really, really dig from a design standpoint in the beer world? or beverage world,
Or-
high noon,
And then
you
also
know?
like out of the beer world too. If there's
Yeah.
like artists that are inspiring to you when you go to make beer labels, that'd be interesting as well.
I think to me it's not that much in the beer world. I think we used sort of the beer world as something to look at and then kind of go another direction in a sense. And that's not because we didn't like it, or I didn't like it. It was just because it was already there, right? And I think there's so much good beer design nowadays. Somewhat streamlined, I'd say. I mean, it's surprising. It's surprising to me that there's still so many labels or beer designs that look sort of similar or the same. But I guess it's down to um, marketing and stuff like that. It's not necessarily an artist that makes the decision. I guess I'm in a lucky spot that I'm part owner of the company. I don't really do anything to the. I don't do any brewing, and Henok doesn't do any art. So it makes it easy for us, and we respect each other's work.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say it's the same things that have been inspiring to me with everything I do. Like 60s San Francisco art, like Rick Griffin, Victor Moscoso, stuff like that. It's been very important to me. Comic books, Jack Kirby, everything Marvel. And then when I was like 6 years old or something, someone stuck a Fritz the Cat book in my hands, and that just like changed my life forever. There's so much good stuff happening out there, and I think it's going to be. I think it's going to look very different in a few years. I think you were speaking about Mikkeller, for example. I think what Keith Shore, who used to be the art director of Mikkeller, his new project, Meeting House Beer in Philadelphia. I haven't seen anything in real life, but from what I've seen on their Instagram, it looks awesome.
Yeah.
They've done playing cards and stuff as well.
Yeah.
Tiles.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've never seen a place that tiny, because I just went there in the past month, past like 3 weeks. I was just there, and it's so many people are talking about this meeting house, and so much of it is through social media and just their imagery. And I went and I talked to one of the owners, Colin, and I said, people are talking about you in Chicago, and he was like, just kind of dumbfounded by it. He's like, why are people talking? I was like, I'm just saying, like, your name comes up a lot, and to hear you say that, Karl, isn't surprising, but I think really cool and a good testament to, I don't know, just having kind of some sort of style and it just attracting people. But going back to the other earlier question, I wanted to make sure that Gabriel and Michael had an opportunity to talk about anyone that you're, particularly inspired or just enjoy the work of out there.
Sure. I mean, I got one that happens to tie to Gabe. I have a really old buddy who's done some work for Half Acre, Kyle Poff. Kyle and I were designers when we were in our early 20s together. We stayed in touch forever. We've got a zine that comes out every 4 years or 10 years or so. He's an incredible talent. He's one of these guys that just, the ideas flow. He's like a fount. And he does happen to do some beautiful packaging for a gentleman right here. But similar to Karl, like I hate to say, I don't look that closely at the broader beer landscape, not from a lack of interest, just in terms of inspiration. I'm personally both sort of horrified but fascinated with AI at the moment, and so spend a lot of time just playing with it, understanding it, seeing what's possible, seeing what's not possible, seeing what you would not want to do, perhaps coming from an artist perspective. But I think to do the short list, it's like design greats like Tibor Kalman, or I had the the wonderful luck of working with Stefan Sagmeister for a little while, kind of a contemporary design great. And so being 3/4 of the way in design and branding world, like I also don't really look at design world. It's more like looking out at the larger art world or just culture more broadly. It's so easy to get stuck in the like, pretty good at this these days, but like getting in the Instagram like whirlpool and just getting sucked down. I don't do that anymore, luckily, but I've never done it for design for the same reasons. It's like deeply, not just demotivating, but kind of depressing to just look at the same shit over and over. So looking out like well beyond what's in front of me has usually helped the most. And it also helps to have, inspiration from what I was mentioning earlier, someone like Ed, but also this, incredible group of artists that provide, kind of a counterpoint or, somebody to bounce ideas off of in that, in the context of getting inspired. It's a very long-winded way of saying what the inspirations are, but always looking for more, essentially.
Interesting. I have a feeling that's not typical in the beer world. I've listened to a few panels about design and stuff like that, and I know a lot of people are maybe not navel-gazing, but they're certainly looking out there and looking what other people are doing and trying to and are heavily influenced by that. Like what's popular right now? What are other things doing? What does it look like on the shelf? And having that kind of dictate. So it's interesting to hear both of your takes on inspiration and specifically where you don't draw inspiration. Was pretty cool.
How about you, Gabriel? Is there any specific artists or anything that you like to draw some inspiration from?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and maybe I touched on it before, but I just really like it when breweries do a good job representing themselves and their own, in the ways that are important to them. McKellar came up. Keith's work with McKellar, I thought was, an important part of the evolution of beer, only because it was so thorough. There was 8 million labels of Harry, these characters doing everything under the sun. The how loyal they were to that system of images was wild. I don't think it's been done before or since. Just how deep they went inside of that visual world, and I think that was big for beer. I think the Veil does a great job. Oxbow, definitely one of my favorites. And Oxbow, really sticks inside of a pretty narrow alley as well. But I love that visual communication. I don't know, like Alvarado Street does a cool job for, it's not always like my thing, but I think for them it's pretty spot on. Green Cheek, that damn parrot, I just love it. I don't know. It's just like there's something just perfect about that freaking parrot. So I think they did a great job for themselves there. I like some of the classics too, Sierra, things like that. I brought them up before, but that I love those emotions, that beer as plants and nature and sort of in some way just like basking in it. So that's I can't think of beer and not somehow get to a forest glade at some point. So somebody's got to be out there hammering that home, and I think Sierra does a good job of it.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, you guys all have personal creative kind of outlets and practices or other design for other industries. What are the major differences between when you're like kind of thinking about how to make something specifically for a brewery or for a specific beer versus your own work or work for different consumer packaged goods or something like that?
Right. Is there anything beer specific in your
do you go into like a different mode, or are there like things you move towards, or not at all? Is it all just design? Any who would like to go first?
I'll jump in. I mean, it's surprisingly similar process to other work in some ways. I mean, depending on how you're thinking about the beer, whether it's as a mini poster or, you know, artifact, I think there's a similar singularity about it that, you know, certain other types of work do. For me, I both do, you know, I have my design company. We do primarily brand systems and brand design. And that's such a systems-based approach. You know, of course, the logo matters, but really it's the whole way that the kit of parts comes together that makes something really sing. So in a sense, you know, the beer is important by itself, the label design itself, but then I'm always thinking of the broader, you know, set of beers that we have out at the moment, as well as the programming we're doing at Marz, as well as, you know, upcoming releases, or how it relates to Ed is developing and, you know, has developed a pretty significant non-alcoholic beverage line. So just how does this fit into this really massive array of physical experiences, spaces, retail sales? So there's a lot of things a lot of lenses that get put on this single beer. And in some ways it's kind of like a miniature branding project. And I suppose like that's a little bit of what my other work takes and puts on top of it. Maybe a better version of that is that I still do a healthy amount of editorial illustration just independently of my design company. And those are also really wonderful. I'd say that's almost a one-to-one. It's like you have a singular moment that you're trying to create something interesting, impactful, and communicative. And it can be really freeing that you're not doing a brand system. Forget the fact that there's a whole marketing component to this. Just focus on what makes this one thing incredible. So for me, it's really fun to both zoom in and zoom out, and doing both is kind of necessary for my process.
It sounds really healthy that you're doing the macro, micro thing, but all at once. You know, like to me, I'm very. I get a lot of energy out of being fed up with something and just doing like the opposite the next day.
Yeah,
you know, that really makes me tick. And I think so. That's really interesting that you work with like like brand design systems and stuff like that. So I haven't seen a lot of the Marz designs like in real life, but obviously like I've seen thousands, it feels like on social media and such. And I've been in contact with Ed a little bit as well over the years about different projects. So to me, it also, I mean, even though I don't know him that well personally, it really, like what you're doing is really reflecting his, I guess, approach to culture, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like all over the place, but like in the best, you know, the best sense of the expression. But do you have a set system for, I don't know, like typography or grids and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny going all the way back to an earlier response. Like it's, you know, obviously it's changed over the years, but we were so loose for a while that we've kind of come back to a little more structure, which I think is something we need because of the variety of artwork. So it's had certain implications for like, you know, the location of the name, the location of our logo, the way secondary, tertiary copy is treated. So we do. And if anything, that's been one of the projects I've worked on over the last year is, you know, I think we made so many things over the last few years, and the diversity was what was incredible, but also I still have like a somewhat organized design brain at times, and it was killing me that there was just it's a little too loose and needed to kind of at least pull back the structure, so that I think one way we used to think of it is essentially like you put the logo here, you put the name here. It's completely objective. It's just copy. And then whatever the fuck you want to do happens in the background. And that actually worked because we had, I swear to God, we have like hundreds of labels. So you could, like the care and craft that I see in both of your guys' projects, I almost feel like our quantities almost dictated it. Like the number of collaborators needed a faster moving system. There's like a quantity component to it, which is now slowed down to the point where it can be, I think, a little more thoughtful. It always had the like passion and energy, but as a design system, it was looser than I think we would have liked. And we're getting back to a way of kind of contracting to, I think, elevate everything. Not sure if that is too abstract of a response.
No, that's great.
I think it looks fantastic.
Yeah, I'd like to put that same question that you asked, Karl, back to you. Is there kind of an aesthetic framework that you try to, use as context or work within or around?
I mean, I'd say it's super simple. It's just like one typeface, basically, one sort of word mark for each, title of the beer, and then the word Omnipollo, and that all goes on the back. Because I just want the words to be. I mean, I want whispering, and then I want the image to sort of shout or do its job. It's not necessarily shouting all the time, but you know what I mean. It's like just be more expressive. I mean, if I could, I would just leave out all the words and barcodes and stuff.
Right.
That's unfortunate. That's not possible. Actually, in the very beginning, with the keyhole and such, like the first few years when we silk screen printed bottles, still, it was we actually had to, because of the laws in Sweden, you have to have the name and the information on the some information on the front of the bottle. I had to call the back the front and the front the back.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, it wasn't that hard, but it worked.
Yeah.
Some stupid reason. But I would say, I mean, it's about your initial question about it, like approaching different projects that are not necessarily beer related. I think, I mean, to me, it's the only thing is like that whole cylindrical form. It's such an amazing canvas. It's distorting. It's annoying at times to work with, but it's also, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if this, if this goes for all of us. It's so nice to have that framework, that limitation. Like these are the borders, like these are the edges, but within those you can just do whatever the fuck you want.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. I would like to just ask a follow-up question of you, Karl. Can you just, for my own curiosity, talk to me a little bit about that aesthetic that you have come back to so often, which is, let's use the keyhole. It's something round at the top, and then it kind of widens out as it goes down. And you've used that imagery in an astounding number of ways. I mean, even the candle wax is melting and it's getting wider at the bottom, and it's having that same kind of something at the top and then kind of stretching out. And you've used perspective and so much, but always kind of, not always, but so often going back to that. I would just like to know where that came from, and just if you could talk a little bit about it. I find it fascinating, and one of my favorite things about your beer labels.
I think it's because I wanted, I didn't want to look like it had any rules. I wanted it to be very like I didn't want it to look like boxed in any way. So I wanted it to be all over the place, but I also wanted it to be kind of like an Easter egg type thing. I mean, you obviously seen a whole bunch of our designs, so you see this, you can penetrate that, but most people don't, right?
Mm-hmm.
I try to keep it very vague, but it is important for me to have very layered artworks. I want it to be interesting to look at, but also, so that you can go back to it and be rewarding. Mm-hmm. And if you look at a second time, a third time, or if you live with the design, it should open up even more.
Yeah.
I want it to be rewarding, basically. I mean, and that's just goes back to when I was a kid and bought records. You'd look at the record sleeve or the 7-inch single sleeve, whatever, listening to the records over and over again. It just made the music better, more weird, more mysterious, mythic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that shape is just one way out of several that I've been playing around with, what it does to your brain a little bit.
And even now, I mean, even the Omnipollo logo is that the O at the top, and then it kind of stretching out.
I really didn't want a logo.
Yeah.
Like you were saying before, Gabriel, that like resisting a logo, so tempting. So I mean, I think I managed for like 3 years or something, and then like I can't come up with a new design every single time.
Right. Reinvent the wheel over and over and over. Yeah.
Yeah, reinvent the pyramid over and over.
Yeah. But it's, I mean, to me, I'm just scrolling through some of your past labels and seeing the different ways you've done it. And anyone out there listening who hasn't doesn't know what I'm talking about, just do a Google search for some of Karl's labels, and it's amazing how you've fit that aesthetic time and again. And it's I'm just fanboying out a little bit, but it's pretty awesome.
Remember when you made that pyramid?
Yeah, that was awesome.
That was awesome.
Yeah, me at the Chris Farley show. Exactly.
How about you, Gabriel? You make these lovely kind of organic form painted wood pieces in your personal practice. How does that feel, or is the impetus different between making those and developing a piece of imagery for Half Acre, or they come from the same place, or what's your approach to those two things?
Yeah, to me, these are two very different parts of my brain. And, I'm not a, designer by trade. I'm definitely a product of art school, the fine arts system. And I think the things that I do in my personal time are really about like well-being, and they have no function. They are useless. And I love them for that.
Beauty is useful.
What's that?
Beauty is useful.
Yeah, no, I know, but like,
I'm joking.
There's no, they don't need to exist in a practical sense whatsoever. And, it's really just, more for me in all the best ways. And, I think when looking at label design and things like that, you sort of like develop all these little rules for yourself. Maybe there are rules that were dictated to you, but I think we all probably have these systems that we've come to rely on, and ways of thinking that hopefully accomplish a commercial task and make them motivational to some degree, to hopefully encourage people to want to have them in their hands, in their homes, and to be able to like be in my basement and just like shape wood in some fundamental way is pretty freeing. And it's a great pressure relief from all the rest of the stuff, which can include labels.
Well, I love the little things you do. The things you do that you post for your personal work. That I find them beautiful.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. About
10 minutes. 10 minutes. Yeah, we want to be mindful of everyone's time here. And I don't want to end on this. We'll have to do something after, because I don't want to end on.
What's your worst label?
Right. No, I wanted to ask. Yeah, was there anything that was kind of
we'll end on that.
Like a learning, like a learning experience
No.
that you kind of took away. I don't want to end on that. Yeah. I don't know if it's it doesn't need to be even a negative thing, but something that you kind of had like an unexpected reaction to, or something like that you unexpected, didn't foresee.
No, I've got a sideways way of answering that, which is, because I can't throw too many people under the bus here, but I'll throw myself under the original logo. The way we used it, not so much in an individual can or bottle back in the day, and this goes counter to what Karl is talking about, and it obviously works for him and them, but probably not for us, was we made, you just could, all you saw was the art, and people had no idea what it was. And that is totally cool in some formats, but when you're kicking out, at the time, this was early, like dozens of beers, the beer types per, quarter, which was the pace at which we were going. for people out there to not actually know what the brand was just didn't work very well. So this was sort of, I did the designy thing in my world. I was like, I want to see the artwork and I want that to be the hero. And perhaps, unlike Karl's work that does live within a certain space, like we had dozens of artists putting stuff on labels and people just didn't know it was Marz. And I think that was just a commercial learning, a tempering of some expectations in a certain channel. Now, like, I have every one of those bottles and I still love them. But I think over the years, sometimes the just commercial constraints are real for, a functioning business in certain channels and certain sales channels. And, it was, we got it. It's not that we don't still, minimize the logo or things like that. That's a very basic way of talking about it. But just understanding what the hell things do on retail, like in retail. And perhaps this is also just tied to the big bang of it all. The fact that there were just so many, and that if like 12 different things on a shelf all look different, I think we weren't tapping the equity that is Marz. So the fact that people didn't know that we were doing that. I mean, it was kind of cool to know that everybody liked these things, but weren't putting them together. In some ways that's successful, but in other ways, like completely unsuccessful. Hard to get people to come to the brewery or to come to some incredible programming if the brand isn't actually out there enough. So I'm sure there's a counter argument or a different way we could have done it, but it's been an interesting, process of learning what works and where, and, and what the product lifestyle is.
I think key, that's super interesting. I think key is figuring it out yourself, not just like looking at what other people are doing and then like doing that. I mean, it's a tough time for everyone, like economically and, all other ways possible in the world right now. And in craft beer, especially here in Europe, it's crazy. Like everything is so expensive and, with the wars and everything. And I see a lot of people freaking out, because breweries are, closing down, right and left. And I see people getting worried. And when they get worried, they start like looking at what other people are doing, which is insane. They should be looking at what other people do because they're going to close down soon. You just have to find your own way. But that's a really tough way of doing it because you really have to do your homework. So I think what you're saying, like, that thing that you're saying that you have to figure out how retail works. I think that's it probably, right? I mean, I'm sure you would come up with way more interesting ways than 90% of the other, your competitors.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it, Karl. And I think the stuff I'm referencing is like the, maybe 8 years old packaging. We evolved it over the years, but you're right. It is a totally different experience at this moment. And I think, if we were just looking to others and replicating, we'd be in a ton of trouble. Luckily, I think we've all established we don't tend to think that way. But you're right. I think that's, I guess, just point being like understanding some of the, commercial or retail. I don't know if I want to use the word realities, but just understanding how it works functionally is a helpful. Is helpful context.
Gabriel, anything you'd like to add?
I think we're screwing up all the time. It's like it's a work in progress endlessly, and I don't know. We probably do 50 different. No, yeah, maybe I don't know, 40 some labels a year at least. We've done a gajillion since 2007. So it's always a work in progress. And I think the needs are always evolving and we're sort of like trying to catch up to those at all times. And so always room for improvement. And I feel like we're always telling ourselves that we need to make this change in order to better suit the road ahead. And so, yeah, it's always an evolution.
I think we have time for probably one last question. So I guess we should look into the future.
Sure.
Is there anywhere that you guys are hoping to see art and design and beer kind of progress or change, or is it something that you're just gonna kind of just sit down, head down, and kind of do in your own way? I'm just curious, kind of looking forward. If you guys have any thoughts about what that may portend. Okay, nobody does.
That's a stumper.
Yeah, that's okay.
I know. I feel like this is sort of it, and I think Karl was touching on a little bit. I think the world of beer, there was a pretty consistent evolution for a while. Things were changing often. There were a ton of ways to push the needle forward and do new things, and whether that was with brewing and beer styles, the visual nature of beer, and there was a rapid ascent. And I think, I don't want to say beer is stuck, because I don't think that's the case, but it's going to take some sharp thought, I think, to push beer into these next places, which it will get there. I believe that, and it's going to be really ambitious and smart and forward-thinking people that will push it into these next places above the space where we sit right now. And I'm pumped for it. My brain's in it. I want to be part of that conversation, and but I have a hard time putting shape to it or words to it today.
Cool. Well, is there anything else you would like to say, Mike, before we?
Do you guys want to tell people who are listening where they can find some of your work, or some of the brewery, some information about the breweries you work for, like internet or otherwise?
Yeah, most of my stuff is, I have a website, but I never update that shit. Maybe I think the best way of finding the beers is probably omnipollo.com. That's pollo with double L.
Mm-hmm. Yep, like chicken in Spanish.
Yeah,
like chicken.
Like all the chicken.
All the chicken. All of them. Cool. Michael?
Sure. Marz.beer is the go-to for the beer. I'll do a little shout out for one of the more recent things we're up to, which is the non-alcoholic stuff I mentioned earlier, which is everything from like sparkling waters to CBD drinks to THC stuff to teas, shrub sodas. It's drinkmars.com. Confusingly similar. Maybe that'll change. But anyway, it's some interesting stuff, in the pipeline. And I'll second some of Gabriel's mentions about what's upcoming. It's a really interesting time. I'm not sure exactly how it comes together, but I'm in it as well. So excited to see what happens.
Gabriel?
Yeah, you can, at Half Acre Beer on all the social stuff. Yeah, you'll find what you need about what we're up to in those places. It was great to be a part of this, and I have a lot of respect for what Michael and Karl are doing.
Agreed.
Yes, absolutely.
And yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank all three of you for coming on. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah. Thanks so much to all three, Gabriel, Michael, and Karl. Thank you guys so much. Next week we've got a roundtable coming up, so that's what listeners can expect. And hey, if there's any feedback that you guys have, you don't have to do a handwritten letter. We appreciate them. They're awesome when you guys spend the time to do that. But we also take electronic letters, as I call them, and you can all that info is in the show notes. But I just wanted to once again thank our guests for coming on. It's been an awesome conversation. And that's all I got to say. Anything you want to say, Mike?
That's all. Thank you. All
right, guys. Thank you so much. So long. Oop, turn it up. I knew I was going to mess this up. All right. Thanks.
Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again, 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 again.